Go. So here it is. The
Here it is.
return of the social happy hour. Cheers to you, my friend. Unfortunately, I have no bourbon with me as this is the first episode, though I am envious of your fine beverage. The social happy hour is back, and this is our show that we still have to write an opening tagline for. But to me, it would seem that it would be a place where we cover a couple different issues that are happening in social, either something that's relevant and timely, industry news and such, ideas, opinions, various different things.
But do we really need to have an opening, Jeff, if it's a podcast? I mean, half the time I listen to really good podcasts, and, you know, if you're listening to, like, say, The Nerdist, I don't think any of the Nerdist programs have a real opening as far as the actual beginning of a conversation.
But how will we SEOs? How will we SEO? Where will we find our SEOs?
Where will we find our SEOs? Maybe in the alphabets. We might find them in the alphabets.
Good. Okay, so if we don't need an opening, let's just forget everything I said, and let's just start talking about the topic that we have chosen to start with for the return of the social happy hour, and that is what happened to the heart of social. Thoughts? Should we clarify the question?
I think maybe we should, and I think the question really is that it's gone from the days, obviously, of, wow, you pulled that move out really early. It's gone from the days of, this is very much a relationship building platform and a way in which just to listen and figure out what's happening in the world, to how can we just push stuff? How can we figure out ways to make immediate money on it? When you bring up Snapchat, for example, in the marketing meeting, how can I make money from this little contraption?
We're having a problem. Are you there? Sorry, I lost you for a second. I don't know if everybody else did, but
there you go. Back. I see you.
Poor internet signal, audio only.
Already having issues with Blab.
Right. Come on, Blab, get your shit together. All right, cool. Do I have your audio at least?
Yeah.
This would be perfect for the audio version of our show. So I think it came to that point for a couple of reasons, not to necessarily defend how we got here, but don't these networks need to make money?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think at some point somebody probably said, well, it seems as though if we're going to keep pouring money into Twitter, they should probably pay a few dollars of it back now and again. Or, you know, they said to Facebook, hey, it's really great that you're spending all this money on server technology, but it would be really cool if you could make a few dollars. So I think with that came some need to monetize the platform, and who better to monetize the platform than to turn back to the original monetary platform, which was advertising. The best possible way to get people to pay money into this platform was either to have them buy advertising or to encourage the users that are used to free to cough up money for a pro account or additional features.
Yeah, and I mean, look, they're not wrong for monetizing. Obviously, they're a business. They have bills to pay. They have things to do. They have people working for them. I think that part of it is almost like we led as social marketers, as social business persons. We had to prove out the means for it. We had to show that there was value, that there was value to it, that the actions we were doing weren't just hocus pocus. And by doing so, we actually were able to point to dollars. And then once dollars were involved, we had to, at the same time as the social networks did, as marketing teams, we had to figure out, okay, how are we going to make this even better for ourselves? Because we can't just continue on year over year in the exact same fashion. So
sorry, I was going to say, I think there are actually two issues here. When I think of the question of the heart of social, are you doing both a green smoothie and whiskey?
Yeah, because I just got back from.
So you're simultaneously detoxing and retoxing.
Correct.
That's amazing. Anyway, so I was going to say, I think there's kind of two sides to this heart of social. So when I think of the question of what happens at the heart of social, I think on the business side of things, obviously, on the business side of social and these platforms making money, obviously they had to monetize it. A lot more brands get involved. They're pushing much more content. It's becoming much more advertising. So that is on the business side, but that's to be expected because businesses are there to make money. What about on the personal side. So what about literally the social side of social? Forget about making money. Just for a minute, look at what's happened to how human beings are using social. Think about in the early days of a real name policy, for instance. People were outraged at the idea that you had to use your real name. And the theory was if people use their real names, you'll cut down on internet trolls and harassment and all these different things. And what we've seen is that over several years, people just become more vile with their real names. So the way that we use social and what we expect of one another, I think there may have been a time, I could be wrong, but when audiences were smaller for each of us, where we would share something that's potentially a little bit more vulnerable or a little bit more negative. Whereas now I think that the social norms have evolved to such a point where people don't really allow that. They don't really allow for you to put negativity out into the space. So the social that I look for is also the conversation that's about making things more real and more human and more open and transparent and all that gushy social media marketer language. But it really is, that's what the heart of social was in the beginning, is that flowery, hippie spirit, disruptive force.
I think part of your point too is, think about the way we talked about this even before we hit the record button. Think about the way in which we actually were able to become friends. We did it over Twitter. It wasn't immediate. It was, over a couple months' time where it was just a few tweets every now and then. I don't know if you can really do that today because there is just so much, and there are so many different platforms to pay attention to, or that will take your attention away from maybe trying to build a relationship. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just different. And it's, I think the other part of it too is that because it feels like social networks now feel as though when we go to them, we're looking for entertainment of some kind. We're either looking for real entertainment, we're looking for facts, content, etc. Then because so many people are looking at themselves as a personal brand, they feel like they have to push their own stuff out. So it's less of just having a one-on-one conversation like we're having here and a dialogue where like you would have at a happy hour, at a bar, in a social situation. It's much more like, hey, look at me over here at this gigantic carnival. I have to bring people over to me just to even have a conversation or just like some kind of interaction. And that's on Twitter. That's on Instagram. It's anywhere you consider a social network to be.
So does that bother you personally? Like, does it bother you that there's one, that audiences have fragmented across everything and everybody's looking to get their piece of the pie and build their brand and market to marketers? Or, does it bother you as a business person? Does it, that's harder to reach your audience and that they're all kind of very self-involved? Or does it bother you more as a user? I mean, what is it about the heart of social going away that you find most disturbing? I have my opinions, but.
So, it's frustrating from both sides. From the personal standpoint, I feel like the relationships that I created 2-3 years ago are much more meaningful than they are today when starting from a social means. Now, that could be for a variety of reasons, but let's look at just the reasons from, there's just so much more noise going on. There's so much more, there's much more push of stuff as opposed to, sharing the simple things. I really think that as much as the sharing of simple things gets kind of a bad rap within social amongst the older crowd, the big part of that was that that's what the social networks were for. It wasn't for these long diatribes of what your life may have been or what's going on really massively in your life, because sometimes that's almost too personal for me. And I know that other people might be more comfortable doing so. From the business perspective, having more competition is difficult for everybody. It makes it more expensive. It makes it a lot more difficult to keep up on different things and just do your everyday job. But it's part of the challenge. It's part of the fun from the business side. It doesn't make it as much fun as the user. You kind of become a bit more disconnected, in my opinion, because there is just so many more things to keep track of and to worry about. And I feel as though the people that I have really strong bonds with, I have connections with offline, whether that's through a text message or just through private communication. And we set up things through email. I don't talk to you as much in email, but we talk a lot via Facebook Messenger. I talk to a lot of people via Facebook Messenger. I think that's been a big change. It's not as much.
So the move to dark social has really been a pretty, I've at least noticed that the move to things like WhatsApp, Snapchat, Facebook Messenger, Instant Message, or Instagram, direct messages, like literally all of the private messaging tools seem to be much more in use than the more public facing things. But let me ask you this. You had mentioned that back in the day, like when we met on Twitter, that it was easier to form these like more meaningful relationships, or that with all the noise that there is now, it's so much more difficult to cut through and actually connect with people. But I'm paraphrasing you, by the way, that's not a quote. I guess I often think and say a lot of the same things, and I'm wondering, is that true? Like actually, let's call into question that hypothesis that it is more difficult now. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just that you have to, and I think if we look at the proliferation of these new apps, things like Peach, things like Snapchat, Stinger, any of these new things that are coming out that like the kids are using, aren't these all just ways for people to say, it's gotten too noisy where I was, let me get a new place where I can go somewhere where it's a little quieter. So we're constantly retreating from the noise to be able to find a smaller audience so that we can make those meaningful connections again. Are we potentially settling into because I think I'm a social media curmudgeon, are we potentially settling into that, what do I need that for? I've already got a television. You know what I mean? Are we becoming that because we don't want to have to keep up with all the new things? And possibly that's where the relationship building is happening?
Possibly. I'm not gonna say that's not the case, because there's plenty of times when, I know you've talked about it a lot, where whenever anybody asks you, and you're not the only one to say this, what's next? Mm-hmm. And you will say,
I say the same thing every time.
We don't need anything else. We just need better stuff of what we already have.
Yeah. We don't need any more, what's the expression I use? We don't need any more hammers. We just need better carpenters.
Right. It's the same idea as what Jay Bear talks about. It's all about the wizard, not the wand.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, both of those things are true. When you're talking about the actual tools, and even the tools that allow you to use the tools, but more effectively from a business standpoint. But innovation is still really a necessity, and it's never going to change. We wouldn't have a car if it wasn't for somebody saying, like, a faster horse isn't going to cut it. Mm-hmm. To paraphrase from the paraphrased Henry Ford quote.
We should start an entire show called Paraphrasing Paraphrases.
Yeah, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it's almost, and the other part of it, it's cyclical too. We go from public to private, from private to public, and vice versa. Think about how it is in Philadelphia. Think about the way in which people have moved back and forth. 50 years ago, people were leaving the city to go to the suburbs, and now it's the reverse, because the way in which technology is allowing people to, ironically, as we're talking about this, connect with different things, different services. Not socially connect perhaps, but just get things they need to. And maybe this is part of it too. The technology has enabled us to not need people almost. We can just hit a button and things come to us. You get a car when you need it to drop you off at a place. You get a car to deliver you food. And I know Brian Kramer wrote a lot about this in the book Shareology. Just the idea of, we're getting to a place in time when you don't need to move. You don't need to leave your house. And it's something that he researched from another book, and I can't remember it off the top of my head now, but maybe that's contributing to the heart of social. We don't need to be as social anymore because we can just be reclusive.
But wasn't the idea behind these tools to make us have the ability to be more social, even if we don't leave our space? Isn't that part of it? Is that I can connect with somebody who's over in Denmark right now, or Amsterdam, or the Czech Republic, or Japan, or Hawaii, and I can have a real life, actual social conversation with them, which again calls into the question, is that actually being social or making friends, or are we just filling time talking with one another? But I think still I want to come back to, is our assumption wrong? Is the assumption wrong that we can no longer make these meaningful connections because it's gotten too noisy, or maybe we're just not trying hard enough anymore?
I mean, I'd be hard pressed to say that you can't make connections anymore, because obviously you and I both will continue to make connections via social channels, whether it's through Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Peach. Um,
Oh, we're going to get to that. That's the next topic. We got to do that one next. But, so the reason why I asked, though, is that I have been on a little bit of a Snapchat kick lately. I don't know if you've noticed. But I've been more into it. I just want to experiment with it. I like to try and actually one of the things I'm doing this year, I don't know if I told you this, but, or if you saw it on my Snapchat story, but I'm doing every month, I'm picking a network and I'm going to dive deep into that network. So I'm going to use Vine for an entire month, and I'm just going to go deep into Vine and understand how to find people who can, they're going to find new people to follow me, find new people to follow them, understand what people are doing really well, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'm going to do LinkedIn. I'm going to do Pinterest. I'm going to try all the different networks. But I've been really deep in Snapchat for the past 4 or 5 days or something, just because I want to see how it works and actually give it a shot without any sort of preconceived notions. And what I found is I'm actually meeting some new people and interesting people, and I'm able to reach out to them and see some of the ways in which they're using Snapchat that I hadn't even considered. And it's funny because, back to the thing that you had said before, that if somebody asks me what's the next thing, I typically say, stop looking for the next thing, just be good at what you've got. I think to a certain extent, I've gotten a little bit trapped in using the things that exist well, rather than seeing the new thing and letting that actually expand my perspective on things.
And I actually think so. When we really begin to think about, like, have we lost the heart of social? I feel like we've now gotten to a point in our conversation where I'm going to say no. I don't think we have, because
that's uplifting.
Yeah, and I think it's because of what you just said. It's the idea of, are we now, having been, I don't know how long you would say you've been in the social game, but probably, almost going on 10 years, I would imagine, close to it.
It's close to it.
And I'm over, 6. So that's a long time, even 6 years in the social media space. It's a lot of decades in the digital world.
It's almost start to finish at this point.
Yeah, it's, but I feel as though, and I know a lot of other people talk about this, the majority of the things that we are doing are no different than what other people have done. We're just figuring out new ways to do it. And if we don't keep our eyes and ears open, and our application, our app stores open to checking out new stuff and figuring out if it works for us and the people who we want to connect to, then we're never going to expand our horizons. We're never going to find new conversations, new things to become passionate about, new things that we need to know about to become better people, better citizens, better employees, better employers. And I think that we know a lot of people who have started their careers within social and left, not because they couldn't hack it, but because they found their passion within social, and they decided that it's not the social media that they loved, it's the ability to connect to something that they found really fascinating. And I think when we really think about it, that is the power of social. That's the heart of social. It's the ability to connect, find something really meaningful that you, again, connect to, and that you want to,
and find your tribe within
and
that.
You want to then bring other people to connect to that.
That makes perfect sense. All right, well, shifting gears to something that we briefly alluded to, and I would love to talk about because it's been all the rage, is, and I'm going to change the way that I phrase this question to how it really sounds in my head. But do we really need any more fucking social media or apps? Like, do we really need any more? When everything comes out, all the new things, when they come out, the first thing I say is, how is this different? Why do I need this? Because what I've found is that I haven't seen very much. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Virtually all of these apps do virtually the same thing. Some of them do it easier than others. Some have a certain mechanism that makes it a little bit faster or a little smoother or a little bit easier to associate a certain behavior with. But ultimately, they all allow us to share thoughts in text, in pictures, and in videos, mostly. Some of them are searchable, some of them are not. Some of them are about close friends, some of them are not. But how you choose to build your network also informs that. You could use Snapchat as a broadcast platform. You can use it as a one-to-one engagement platform. You can use Twitter privately or publicly. You can use it to broadcast out to hundreds, or you can use it to talk with a small select few and only focus on what they're posting. So the thing is that no matter which network you're using, it seems to me that all of the options are already covered. At this point, we are just basically reinventing the wheel each time, and which brings me to Peach. So Peach. Why? I don't understand it. I listened to an excellent podcast episode on it that comes on. It's a Blab show that comes on right after ours called Social 545. All of you listening, I should definitely suggest that you check it out. But they talked about Peach. The episode name was WTF is Peach. And they explained a little bit about the different features of it, who's using it, how they're using it. And there's this thing called magic words in there, which is kind of like Slack's commands if you use Slack. But I don't see any real reason why we need it. I don't see any reason why we should post content there instead of, or not in addition to, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all the different sites that we use. Why are we trying to build a new network somewhere else? The question that runs through my head is, don't all you people have jobs?
So 3 things on this. Number 1, if anybody knows more about Peach than Jeff and I do, please feel free to hit the open seat below.
That's a good
Number
point.
2.
I'm going to actually I'm going to change the topic here to, does anybody know anything about Peach and want to join us?
Number 2, we're well beyond need. And it's less about need at this point and more about just what are people more interested in? How are people communicating? And does this actually serve a better purpose than another application does, than another, service within the web does? And, admittedly, I've spent maybe a few hours within Peach and, going back and forth with my buddy, Eric DeMacco, and a friend from high school, just experimenting, not doing much with it. Because I think the day that it came out, it was like I was walking on a plane and then I kind of forgot about it. But I know that I need to just mess around with it and see what it's about. Because I'm sure it's one of those things where, like, if you actually begin to spend a little bit of time with it, it's probably a little bit like Snapchat, where it's like, hey, this is a lot of fun. And that ultimately is like what it is. Like if it's fun, it grabs attention. If it adds something to your life, it adds, then there's just a bunch of attention that needs to be paid to it. And if there's attention paid to it, then obviously there are people doing interesting things within it. Potentially. It doesn't guarantee there's interesting stuff happening for you, but for a good number of people, it's obviously pretty cool. Because, there was a bunch of tweets about it the day that it came out. I know Mashable had like a whole, curated list of people who were like, if you're not using, Peach, then you suck. But then again,
yeah, right. Because it's like it's already so important to add to the social media mix.
So, I think those are the 2 things that I feel about Peach and any other new app. Like we have to keep our minds open, and I include myself in that because I know that I become sort of trying to optimize. I use that marketing term way too often with social stuff. You always have to optimize within the things you're trying to do for business. And that's not a bad thing, but it just means that you might be missing out on the new thing where you can, as Gary Vaynerchuk talks about, or Robert Scoble talks about, you might find the next thing that works really well for you personally, your personal brand, or the brand that you're representing as an individual.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep, especially if you're a consultant or an agency, it's important to keep your mind open and look for new channels where you might discover that audience. If you had ignored Pinterest all this time and your audience were, wedding, beauty, and home decor women between the ages of 30 and 45, and that was your audience, you didn't know what the hell Pinterest was, like you pretty much missed the fucking boat. But I think, there comes a point where I just keep coming back to, there's only so much time in a day, and there's only so many things that you can pay attention to and still live your life and still do your job effectively. And I look at a lot of the people that are really successful, and you know what I see them using? Email, blogging, podcasting, and Facebook. More, as much as anything else. Yes, sure, they're checking out other platforms here and there, but most of the ones that are really successful, they're building their email list. and they're probably blogging or podcasting, and they're using things like Facebook and Twitter. Those are generally the oldest networks out there, the oldest tools that we're using. And I don't see them generally rushing to Ello and Peach and Slinger. I think they're very cautious if you look at the people who are really successful. Now, I think Gary Vee jumps right in, but Gary Vee also has people that follow him around with a video camera. And, I know that he works extremely hard, like morning to night, but I think he has a lifestyle that's built around the ability to try out these tools. And he makes his money by advising others using these tools about what's going to be hot and what's not. And he has a following and he's influential. The majority of people can't just jump on Peach and pay a couple hours attention to it, because then they're not paying attention to the networks they've already built. I don't know. I guess I just think to a certain extent, we're running out of space for these new apps, and I'm running out of patience, and it's making me feel like a real hater. And I don't like to feel like a hater.
Well, it's a good thing you mentioned that hater part, because it's not like there's a book coming out by a favorite author of ours that can judge that exact topic. But
hug your haters.
Yeah. I don't want to keep spinning on this, only because I just feel as though we both have established now that we feel as though we're curmudgeonish, but we know we have to change that in order to actually just evolve, because we know that there's different points in our lives where the software and the hardware kind of become out of date, and it's not as easy for us to look at something and get it, right? I have a 16-year-old brother. I have 2 siblings in college. And when I ask them about like how they actually use social, Facebook doesn't come up. I know we haven't talked about Facebook really, but Facebook doesn't come up. It's Snapchat, it's Instagram, and it's Twitter, surprisingly enough. I mean, the thing that comes involved in all of those is that they're visual. And that's the exact same thing that even that Peach has. And when you talked about Slack earlier, we use Slack at work. And one of the best parts about Slack is that you can use not just emojis, but you can use GIFs. And the communication factor in that is great. It creates, it allows people to understand who you are as an individual. When you use specific GIFs, it allows them to figure out who you are as far as your humor profile, what you get from a pop culture standpoint, how keyed in you are to different things, and how empathetic you can be potentially.
It's like using movie references, or like when you and I drop into doing the Peter Griffin voice.
Exactly. So, I mean, as far as it being something where, Gary Vaynerchuk has worked hard enough so that he has the ability to go out and find the stuff that he needs to pay attention to, so he can go and sell for his agency. That's his job. He's doing his job. In a sense, we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we didn't, make the time for just learning how to do these things. And people like Gary and Robert Scoble and Mitch Joel and Mark Schaefer and Jay, Lynette, everybody else that does stuff like that to allow us to, do the things we have to do to make money, so we can go back later on and read and listen and watch all the reviews about these things and how to leverage them properly. Here's how to get the download on Snapchat. Carlos Gill talks about Snapchat all the time, and he's been on it for quite a while. Like, he's been really hammering it down.
Hammering away.
Yeah. And, it is, we need people like him to kind of curate the lists for people like us, so we can then go out and share.
So we can get on later and just reap the rewards of it.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I want to change up the topic so we don't sound like we're just assholes that hate on everything. And let's talk about what's up with podcasting being all the rage. One, definitely got to give you the shout out here, because you were the genesis of podcasting at True Voice Media with Social Echoes. Still a great name for a show. You should still do something with that.
I need to. Thank you.
You really should, honestly. It's a really great name for a show. But beyond that, I would have never started a podcast. I wouldn't say never. Here's the thing. Here's what it was. You didn't even listen to podcasts. And
part of it is that's just the way that I learn, is just having conversations with people that I find interesting. So I become quite brave, whether it be people at PetSmart. I work for PetSmart. Anybody listening, watching, people in the senior leadership within PetSmart, if there's people I need to know or meet and talk to, it sometimes is a little bit intimidating for other people in the company to actually just walk up and say hello. I'm a social media manager. It's part of my job to be social. So social, not just within social media digital channels. It's being hello, nice to meet you within the real world. And just listening and having a conversation with people is a lot of what podcasting is. And I've always been a big advocate of listening to audiobooks and just digesting information and storytelling that way. It's a way in which you can still do something else while actively listening, and your subconscious is picking up on it. So there's a bunch of different reasons why doing it.
Why now? Why is it picking up? Like, why has it taken off? Podcasting has been out. If you talk to Lynette, I mean, she's been talking about it since like 2002 or 2003. Like, she's been on it forever. Steve Lubetkin. Talk about some of these people that have like really been in the podcasting game for a long time. They've been doing it for a long time, and most of them have been advocating for it for a long time. Steve was podcast Steve when Twitter came out. So I guess the question is, why is it right now that's happening? Is it because of the proliferation of mobile, or is it just that trends just sometimes hit and they take off? Like, why did podcasting become a thing now when the number of networks hasn't, expanded that much? It's still pretty much iTunes. We've got Google Play now. We've got Blog Talk Radio, Stitcher.
I think you're answering your own question, in my opinion. It's operations. The operations behind podcasting has become way simpler. Think about what we're doing right now. 2 or 3 years ago, how would we be doing this?
Good call.
We'd be doing this via Skype, or we'd be doing it via Google Hangouts. Now, you talked about social echoes, the podcast. I had a lot of fun doing that. We're going to talk about social connection and the heart of social, our first topic. That was a great way to do that. That was networking from the office without having to go anywhere.
Yep.
That was a personal gain. But as far as it actually being viable, it became difficult sometimes, because I was asking really high profile people to give me 45 to an hour, 60 minutes of their time. And I had to make sure that everything was going to work out properly. But you're talking about actually people listening. It's still,
but even on that tip, like your podcast that you did with us back then was an example of actually how, I mean, I know you worked at it, but like how easy it actually is to get incredible people to come on and talk to you. You had Jay Baird, you had Ted Rubin, you had, I mean, like the list goes on and on, the number of people that you got to appear
Michael Brito, Jason Falls twice. Yeah.
So like the fact that you would just reach out to random people and be able to get them on your show at that level was pretty impressive. But I think to your point, the technology is easier now, but still, if it wasn't that hard back then. We had the tools. There were still things there. But right now, in popularity of people listening, I think there's more content being created. People are more bullish on the creation of content. But I think people are also listening to a lot more podcasts. And I can't figure out if it's just the technology that's causing that, or if some sort of tipping point happened, or some influencer kind of started the chain reaction. DIT video, good call. Serial.
Yeah.
That actually is a really good point. That really did change the game in podcasting.
Yeah, but I think, and
good point,
John's right. John is right that Serial was a big push forward within podcasting. But even before Serial came out, there was a big explosion from where it had come from. In the last 2 years, really, podcasting has come really big. The person that, if anybody's listening to and they're in the marketing space and they want to know more about podcasting, the guy you need to know about and listen to is Tom Webster, because he's all over Edison Research. And Edison Research does a program called the Infinite Dial. They come out with it every year. And it's all about the proliferation of internet radio and how people listen to information, content. It could be music, it could be whatever. And
does that include video?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I think it's strictly the Infinite Dial as far as radio dial. And they're still trying to figure it out too. And I could be wrong about that, but I listen to Tom a lot, and I still think
he's got a great voice for radio.
Oh my God.
It's silky smooth. Tom, if you're listening to this at any point in the future, I know you're not on the show right now, but goddamn, man, you have a great voice.
Tommy, if you're listening, you're the best. And he's also wickedly smart. But anyway, to get off of the Tom Webster train, he and Edison Research and the people who look at podcasting metrics all the time are still sort of trying to figure out what's the deal. Now, as far as, again, to go back to operations, the iTunes app has come a long, long way from where it had. Sort of the same way that Facebook's mobile app, a couple of years ago.
Oh my God, do you
how
remember the
how it is
original?
now.
Yeah.
I mean, the iTunes app, I went from Android to iOS recently, and the podcast app that I remember from the last iOS device that I had, which is an old iPad, the new iPod, the new podcasting app is way, way, way better. So I think just that alone and the ability to find good stuff is really a big help.
Yeah. Speaking of podcasting, for those out there who are listening right now, this will be available on iTunes. So go to thesocialhappyhour.com and you'll find out more about that. Beyond that, check out True Voice Media's podcast. It's pretty damn good. We're up to 40, well, depends on when you listen to this, but as of right now, we just published number 41. And we have a new intro and outro. Did you listen to it?
I didn't yet.
You should listen to it.
I know. You're going to yell at me until I do.
I'm not going to yell at you. I'll just keep snapping you with.
Yeah.
I'll just get progressively angrier looking photos.
So what about you, Jeff? I mean, like you're somebody who is not a podcast. I'll say podcast native. You now are fully booked into it, but you didn't come from the school of thought where you would gravitate immediately towards podcasts. From your perspective, what's been the big change?
I honestly think that there's a lot better content out there than I think there was. There's more content producers. So there's more to find. And I'm also stumbling upon and getting, now that it's more popular, I'm also finding more people are telling me about podcasts than I had ever before. So like before, it used to be kind of like you went to the iTunes store and it was like whatever's on there. But now it's that there's a lot of people who are like, oh, have you listened to this one or have you listened to that one? So there's a lot more referrals going on. And now I'm finding I have more programming than I can possibly listen to. And, my kind of behavior online is I tend not to be much of a consumer of content so much as I am a creator of content. I much prefer to get online, say what I have to say, maybe contribute one or two things to somebody else's in a form of a comment or taking part in it, maybe read a few things, and then I dip off and I go do my work because my priority is building my company. But in terms of like my behaviors online, I don't really consume as much content as I think a lot of people do. There's a lot more passive consumers. And I think the proliferation of content has probably helped with that. I've also found that I'm learning a lot by not just listening to podcasts, but by actually doing podcasts. It makes me a lot more interested in listening to podcasts to hear how others are doing it. So for instance, I started listening to Pam Marketing Nuts. You know Pam?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I started listening to a couple of her shows, and I really like the way she frames things. She's a social business evangelist, which they're hard as hell to come by. And I listened to her show and just the format of it. And I realized that there's a lot more content producers that are monetizing their show in one way or another that aren't so intrusive. John made a comment here, need to figure out how to monetize it with less intrusive ads. I think that's true. I don't like when they're like loud and abrasive, sort of like radio style ads. I actually have started putting in my own sponsor link or sponsor content inside of the episodes where it's me narrating it. I'm actually talking about a product that I use and I really like and that we're partners or affiliates with. And I only really got that idea because I was listening to how others were doing it. And I think to John's point in the comments earlier about Serial is that what Serial I think did is it actually it kind of tore down the walls of what I think we understood podcasting to be, which was interview shows. I'm a host. We have a guest. Maybe we invite other guests, callers, whatever, questions of the day. And that was the format. And then Serial said, well, what if we took 12 weeks and we told you a story week by week by week? I mean, it called into question, well, how else could we be thinking about this platform and how else can we use it? So I think not only do I learn well when I'm listening to episodes, it's a good thing to have on in the background. It's great. I love when I am driving out to a client that's outside the city. Podcasts are my favorite. But I'm also finding that it's really helpful as a podcaster to listen to what other people are doing in the same way that I watch Snapchat stories to find out what other snappers are doing so that I can add that to my stuff.
And I think that's the main part of it. Even what John talked about being the advertising less intrusive, podcasting itself is less intrusive. It's because of the audible nature of it, and that it's not a video, but you're still getting similar content to that video. But you don't have to maybe be as directly invested in watching that video if you're going to get all the content from it. Because you can drive a car, you can go to the gym, do all these extra things. You can mow the grass, walk the dog, take care of the pool, do 1,000 different things.
Yeah, I love to put on a podcast while I'm cleaning up the house or something like that.
Yeah, because it allows you to take out the monotony of doing that chore while still allowing your subconscious, as I've said before, to record what that is. So that as you're doing something again later on, that little nugget that really stood out to you, that comes from the voice, the context of the voice, the different tones and the different pauses and the volume and the reactions of other people, that really, I think, elevates the content that is being shared that you wouldn't get from just reading an article, or you get it from watching a video, but it would not be your brain doing the work. And I think maybe that's part of it too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, what's next for podcasting? I just changed the topic to that because I'm curious if we look at where it's started and where it's come to, what's next for it? Like, how do we make it easier for people to create? How do we make it easier for people to consume? And how do we rethink the format so that it becomes something we can do more with?
What will be interesting is I know that Shazam has done a lot of interesting things with marketing as far as there being almost like audible links. And I don't mean links to audible.com. I mean,
I know what you're talking about.
There are different things that are being said. Like for example, if we took this audio and uploaded it into some kind of tool and Shazammed it, then a listener to it could take that audio file and almost click it and have it take them to a different item, take them to a link that we would say, let's link that up in the show notes. Let's take this and, here's 5% off your next, large item at a grocery store, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. At the same time, SoundCloud does different things like that, where you actually, if you're on the same page of the podcast and you're listening to it and you're watching it almost, as you scroll through, there can be different stuff where the actual link that they're talking about pops down.
Mm-hmm. So have you ever seen the not Popcorn Time, Popcorn, the thing that was made by Mozilla? It was like that reinventing web video. Do you think we're looking at something like that coming up, where podcasting has to take on a more experiential, interactive kind of nature, where it's not just sit down, you listen to it, but there's something more to it?
And that's kind of what I was getting at next. The third part that I was going to talk about was, obviously the impending monster that it's going to be virtual reality. Google Cardboard and Oculus. Like, if you were just listening to a podcast, maybe it is like an FDR fireside chat where you're listening to something. But as they're beginning to narrate it, they actually have the different things happening, either the video that comes with it, or just little things like that augment and add to your experience. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's the future.
And maybe the 360 cameras play into that as well. So it'll be podcasting with 360 cameras, so you can experience it like you're actually sitting there. Yeah, it's an interesting idea. What do you think about the idea of I'm thinking in the vein of Serial and how they rethought podcasting. What do you think about the idea of a sort of choose your own adventure podcast, where you kind of start the podcast, you have to structure it out obviously and frame it, but where you create episodes upon episodes upon episodes, and then as you get to a certain point, you provide 2 different episodes to take you down 2 different paths, so an A path and a B path, and you let people actually unfold the story or the idea down one side. So for instance, let's say we were, and this could be even applicable in business.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. Let's say we were going to have a conversation about, will Snapchat be around in 5 years? We could have an episode that takes you down one path for yes and one for no.
Red pill, blue pill podcast.
Ooh, I like that idea. Was it Stone Drunk Sober?
High Drunk and Sober.
High Drunk and Sober. I still think that's a great podcast idea. Nobody out there take it. Or if
Copyright.
you do, at least invite us on.
Copyright 2016 me.
You have to say who me is.
Oh, me.
Nice. Okay, so final topic. We've covered podcasting, what a curmudgeon grandpa I am in the world of social. Do we need any more apps or social? And we started with the heart of social and whether or not there still is one. One final question for you, and that is, will Twitter ever get its shit together? I mean, really, like, will they ever get their shit together?
The money says no. However,
do you mean Wall Street?
I mean, probably them too. But I would say if you're a betting person, the safer bet is to say no. Primarily because every time they try and do something new or do something that copies everybody else, it's Facebook's already done it, or Facebook's going to do it better because they're faster.
Simpsons did it.
Yeah. And it's really a shame because in a world where it's become, at least, especially a couple, like 18 months ago, it seemed like every social network, if somebody came out with something new, it was, oh, we have that too.
Yeah.
And it just was sort of like, yeah. And I use it on the other. So where should I use it now? We saw that with this year, the early part of last year, where you went from Meerkat to Periscope, and now there's Facebook Live.
Yep. I think another one is you look at Twitter Moments, Snapchat Discover, and Facebook Trending Topics.
So Twitter Moments seems like a cool thing. I've used it 6 times. I don't have any real reason for using it. It's basically it's a hashtag aggregator, and it sort of explains a hashtag a little bit better.
It's a little bit easier to follow trending topic, basically. What's interesting is that it actually doesn't even work on my primary Twitter account on my Twitter app. So like the app doesn't even work.
So there you go. But like if it doesn't work, then like why is it there?
However, my Facebook app doesn't work either. It's been crashing, so I don't even get to go on Facebook.
Maybe that's your fault.
Fun. Yeah, it's probably because I talk so much shit on Facebook.
Right. Yeah, everyone just hates you now.
Yeah. Zuckerberg's got it out for me.
Yeah. It's you and I are huge Twitter fanatics.
Of course we
are. I have a Twitter t-shirt, I have a Twitter mug. I began to work with you via Twitter.
I want a Twitter shirt. Where'd you get a Twitter shirt? Did you have to go to Twitter?
No, I was a winner of most likable tweets at a Philadelphia conference in 2013.
That's awesome. That makes sense. You're very likable. Yeah. I could see that.
Thank you. But just as far as, if Twitter's going to go down the rabbit hole of 10,000 characters,
God, I hope they don't do that.
I just feel as though they're going to lose the old guard, and maybe that's fine for them in the long run. But I begin to think of like, okay, so everyone continues to make comparisons to Dorsey and Jobs, whether it's through Dorsey's actual physical appearance and the things he's doing, trying to run 2 companies, and the prodigal son returns, the guy who was ousted, et cetera, et cetera. Could this be the Apple too? I don't know.
See, here's why I don't think so. Normals aren't rejecting Twitter or not signing up for Twitter because of the character limit. That's not what does it. It's not the character limit. It's because they don't see a need to be on Twitter. Twitter isn't fast. I think Snapchat is going to be the one that's eating Twitter's lunch because Snapchat is fast. Twitter's always about real time, short, quick communications, and Snapchat is beating them. They are faster. And I think that's part of the problem. And Twitter, in terms of their innovation, their cycles of updating the product, is being beat by just about everybody. I mean, Facebook's updating their app constantly. They're constantly testing out new things. Now, granted, they're a company that's making money, but if you want to make money, I think you have to continually invest in your product. And I don't think Twitter's doing a very good job of that. They're moving things along slowly, and I don't think they're actually courting normal users correctly. I think what they really need to do is get the loyal users back because they're losing them. And normals aren't going to Twitter because normals go basically where the party is. And there's no party on Twitter anymore. It's just a bunch of spammy link shit. And
speaking of, the loyals of Twitter, I told you earlier, I saw today that Chris Brogan wrote something on Facebook that said, if Facebook had 2 features, and I forget exactly which features they were, but if Facebook had feature 1 and feature 2, I would delete my Twitter account. Now, for anybody who knows how influential Chris Brogan is in the marketing and social connectivity space, that's pretty damning. That he would just completely abandon something that really helps him become...
Scoble has said a lot of very similar things as well. Scoble is all in on Facebook. for the most
Scoble's
part.
totally in on Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, he is all about it, and he's been all about the algorithmically driven feed, which I can't stand. Um, but I mean, he's all. If you're losing these top guys, I mean, how are you ever going to compete? Because I think a lot of the celebrities have turned to the more intimate channels like Snapchat or like Instagram. On Facebook, they're getting access to things like Facebook Live that other people don't have. Makes them feel special, exclusive. They have access to a bigger audience because of Twitter's wasteland of links and not cleaning up the dead accounts and not creating stickiness on the platform. And I think another thing I've noticed is that they don't actually cater to multiple different types of users. So for instance, I'm a creator type user, and there are some people who are news followers, and they just get on there and they just want to see what's happening. I think the actual interface should change based upon how people use the platform in the first place. So if I'm going to be a creator, get me into creation mode as quick as possible. If I'm a news junkie, get me into things like moments as quick as possible.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, to almost close out this show and kind of almost return it to what we were thinking of, I think that what we're getting to as far as what the heart of social is now is it's behind the scenes. That's what everyone keeps talking about. Like every time that you see somebody talking about Snapchat, they talk about, here's what you'll see behind the scenes with me. You can follow along. It's unfiltered. It's my stuff. And it's a level of access and it's another level of unfiltered content that people are just craving. It's that transparency. And maybe Twitter being public is what's hurting it too. Maybe.
I've always thought the simplicity of public and private has always served Twitter well, and I think it serves Instagram well. I think that Twitter needs to move faster. They need to keep people interested, and it needs to be sticky. The problem that I see with Twitter is that the engagement is so low relative to things like Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat. If I post something on all four of those, Twitter, even though it's my favorite network and I have the largest network there, it's the one I'm going to get the least engagement because it's too noisy. And I think not making lists or noise filters easier to implement and use, they're damning themselves to this perception of being very noisy. And I think that's part of the problem that they're having. Now, what's interesting is people typically say about things like Snapchat that it's a more real look at people, right? So it's people showing off the dumb parts of their day. Well, that's what they were doing on Twitter in the beginning, but they stopped doing that and they just started sharing links to their shit. And there became too many people. So as a result, you didn't see that stuff. So being able to focus in on the people that are important to you would help to bring it back to that where you could see those things, but also giving people the ability to remove links and just see what people are saying, look at status updates or change the interface around so that we could see that. I mean, there's no fundamental difference between using Facebook, Twitter, or Snapchat to show the inner parts of your life. It's just what you feel most comfortable with. And the disappearing nature of Snapchat is, I think, what allows people to do that. I think Twitter should introduce disappearing tweets personally. I actually wrote, did you see the post that I wrote on the 4,500 word post on Twitter? They should read that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the other part of it too, not to cut you off.
Yeah.
Actually, go ahead. Because
I was just going to say, I think at this point we're getting into the final, the end of our first return back to the social happy hour and introduction to bringing the show onto Blab. I was thinking if any of the people who are sitting and watching would love to join in. It's kind of an open free-for-all. We've covered a number of different topics, but would love to have some more voices in the room with us. And if not, that's fine. But we are always open for other people to come in. I just want to make sure people knew that they could do that.
Yeah. And what I was going to say, Jeff, is that could it possibly be the age-old term of when it comes to Twitter that marketers ruin everything, that marketers came on, businesses came on, and in order for them to actually drive business, potentially direct business, that the links went up and everybody else had to compete. And now that it's almost a barren wasteland, people are just sort of like, well, it's there's nothing going on there. And it's sort of like we killed a potentially golden goose for ourselves.
Yeah.
And we had to go elsewhere.
Yeah, maybe that's just all this is maybe the lesson of MySpace wasn't that MySpace sucked or that Facebook was so much better, but that these sites will achieve a level of saturation and then people will fragment and go elsewhere to return to the small communities. and then that will grow too big, and then they'll fragment again. And I think maybe the timeline of that has grown, and I guess the maturity of social media has made that more difficult for these networks to just come and go. But maybe that's what MySpace was kind of foretelling, was that now that it's easier to make all of these sites and to create these apps and competitors to everything, that's what's going to happen. There's going to be a saturation point, and then networks will fragment.
Everything has its time in the sun, and then it begins to sort of just fry away. Everything burns.
Can we end the show on a more uplifting note than that?
I don't know. I was thinking about something, but it wouldn't have been.
Okay. Anyhow, so
did you see Star Wars? How about that? Did you see Star Wars?
You know what? Let's close out with that. So anybody who hasn't seen it, I mean, at this point, you have to expect spoilers. So we're just going to talk completely forthright about it. I did see it. I very much liked it.
Darth Vader dies.
Nice. Luke Skywalker. I think it was really good. I think it had a lot of the spirit of the old Star Wars, the 4, 5, and 6, but I think it had a little bit of oomph from the first 3, but kind of brought it in an entirely new direction. I like it. I have been, interestingly enough, reading a lot about how Luke Skywalker is just the worst Jedi ever. Like, every story basically talks about how he just screws something up.
It's like, damn it, Luke, what did you do? Yeah. I am not the biggest Star Wars fan, although there's a reason why I preface that way, because I ended up seeing it 3 times in the first 8 days it was out.
Wait, what?
Yeah. So I got tickets for my fiance and I the Sunday that it came out.
Is she a huge Star Wars fan?
No, but she was like, I want to go see it with you. So she was like, it'll be the first, like, we'll get to see it together. That'll be fun. My buddy came back from San Diego and was like, we need to go see Star Wars. This is before he actually come home for the holidays. And he said, let's go. And I said, you buy the tickets and I'll go. So, of course, he gets it for the Friday it comes out. So it's like, okay, I'll go.
Wow, that's impressive that he even got those tickets.
Yeah. And then my dad and my brother, my brother had seen it. I had seen it. And then my other brother and my dad hadn't seen it. So we all decided to go make it a Steyr guy night and go see Star Wars. And it was fun. So, 3 times. I think I enjoyed it the first and third times the best. Because the first time it just was like, yeah, I'm just going to, there's nothing to expect and whatever. The second time I was looking for things I didn't get. And the third time was just another enjoyment watch. Really thought that Adam Driver was really good as Kylo Ren. I liked Rey. You didn't like him?
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's interesting.
Okay.
That was the most reviled part of the movie. If you look at like kind of what people have said out in the world about him, that is the part that people generally seem to be commenting on negatively.
I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to seeing what else J.J. Abrams does with the universe. So yeah, it should be interesting. I want to see
him direct a Marvel movie. I feel like if he could take over the Spider-Man series, that would be great. Although I'd rather see Spider-Man as a Netflix television show that lasts for 10 seasons and then like 15 movies in between. Is that too much to ask?
He's a busy man, so maybe. But, he's J.J. Abrams.
Maybe not for J.J. Abrams.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, like,
he's got 2 initials. Therefore, he's got 2 names. So he must have double the capacity to do stuff.
I dig it. All right, man. 6:30. I think we did a good job for our first social happy hour. The return. It was interesting to talk to. We're going to spend some time, not on Blab, you and me, and start planning out some ideas for the show. I would encourage anybody who is watching that enjoyed this program, or even if you didn't, tell us what you hated about it. Go to thesocialhappyhour.com, sign up to get notifications about new episodes and such. And we are going to be doing this show every week around this time. Next week, I will have bourbon. It will happen. And maybe by the end of the show, I'll just be drunk and we'll just go on a rant about some shit. But ultimately, I think the idea is let's talk about what's happening in social. Let's try and touch on some current events. Let's plan out some stuff and let's do our thing. You are a good man. A good man. Somebody's calling in. Look at that.
Dude.
Right at the end.
Yeah. You too are a
AO
good man.
Boss Chick. Let's see what AO Boss Chick has to say. What up, AO Boss Chick? Hello.
Echo.
Well, it was nice to see you briefly. All right.
Anyway, what I was going to say is, and if you find people listening out there, we want to thank you for doing so. You can always follow Jeff at jgibbard on Twitter and elsewhere on the socials. And you can follow me at jwstiert. That's Stiert, Steiert.
Eiert. I'm telling you, you need a homepage, man. It's about time. JeffGibbard.com. You can find everything. We need to be able to say JohnStiert.com.
About me. About.me/John Stiert.
No, man. You have to have your own domain, man.
I know.
There are people on here right now, and they might buy that right now and try and sell it to you for like, $5,000.
John
look at that. John just bought it.
No, he did not, because I already own it. I own it.
Oh.
I own it.
Nice try, John. So for all of you out there listening, thank you for listening to the Social Happy Hour. We appreciate the time that you've spent with us. Episode 1, it's raw. It's kind of, we just went to it, but we're going to promote this a little bit more heavily. We're going to take some more contributions. We hope to get more people sitting in seats with us. We hope to address a lot more things that are going on in social and to engage the audience with relevant conversations about social media marketing. And you get what I'm saying. Peace out, homie.
See you, man.